Good evening. Thank you everyone for coming. It's really a tremendous fuss. Great opportunity to see that during the summer weeks, summer months, people come off after a whole entire day of work. They come to spend some time to learn at night. The punishment should be made that they should continue going mechayil el chayil. Being that this year Shabbos Shechol by Tisha B'Av, I just want to take a few moments to talk about certain halachas and nafkaminas that are pertinent and pertain to this year. So at first glance you say, for other B'nai Ashkenaz, what's the difference between Shvur Shechal Boy and not Shvur Shechal Boy? Kimat, it would seem that most, or at least all the halachas already apply from already Rosh Chodesh, and there are some stringencies that we take upon ourselves already from Shabbos of the Tammuz. So really, if it would be a share in the Sfaradish shul, people have the mimic Sfarad, they follow the Beis Yosef, they follow the Machaba, okay, so you can spend time on it. But on the B'nai Ashkenaz, really, you would say at first glance, what's the nafkamina, what's the difference? But the truth is that there are really numerous nafkaminas. The time is late, so I'm not going to speak out all the nafkaminas, but more famously, it became a big thing today that people make simon during the 9 days, and it's based on a Ramon Shulchan Aruch. The Ramon says that during the 9 days, when it comes to a Sudas mitzvah, it's mutter b'basa b'yayin. Despite the fact that there was a minig not to eat basa, not to eat meat in the 9 days, that was only by a Sudas Rishus. But if it's a Sudas mitzvah, that's permitted. But yet, the Ramon says there's a difference. Up until Shvur Shechal Boy, the Ramah writes that anyone who would have came throughout the year is allowed to come to the sea. As long as he's friendly enough that he would make the sea in the middle of January or middle of any other time during the year, a person feels a shaykhus, he feels a connection to the person he would come, says the Ramah that that's enough. And therefore, during the 9 days, he can make a sudas basal, a chatchila, and that person can attend. However, the Ramah writes that if it's Shvur Shechal by Tisha B'Av, if it's the week in which Tisha B'Av falls out, says the Ramah, you're only allowed to have a minyan mitzumsim, only exactly 10 people. And the Mishnah Berurah points out, he says you can also have the closest relatives and apostle aedis, they're so close that they're not legitimate witnesses, that's how the curve is so close to family members. So besides that, you're only allowed to have 10. So imagine if a Shvur Shechal Boy person makes, let's say, a bris milah, a siyum, you could have 10 people eating meat, everybody else will have to eat fish and lox and sushi. You wouldn't be allowed to eat the meat. So therefore, we have to figure out what's this year. Is there a Shvur Shechal Boy this year? And we were practicing Tisha B'Av on Sunday. The activities that we're going to be doing of Tisha B'Av we're doing on Sunday, but if you look at the calendar, Tisha B'Av really falls out on Shabbos. So is this entire week, is that Shvur Shechal Boy or is it not Shvur Shechal Boy? It comes a tremendous nafkamina regarding Yisiyim. I mean, tonight the Shalom wasn't negated, it was milchus, but let's say it would have been fleishes. You would have to make 2 separate tables maybe. That's one nafkamina. So you have to figure out if it's Shvur Shechal Boy. I'll tell you another case. It's very interesting. The Mechaber writes, and Simin Tovkov Nunal Sif Yidalid. The Mechaber says that Osel Gedolim was Saper Sekretari. The Shvur Shechal Boy Tisha B'Av. The Mechaber writes that an adult is not allowed to give a child a haircut, but the stringencies of giving a child a haircut only applies during the week of Shvur Shechal Boy, in the week which Tisha B'Av falls out. The Chaya Adam over there writes that even on B'nai Ashkenaz, that we don't take haircuts already from Shabbos of the Tammuz, but when it comes to Ketanim, for children that are under Bar Mitzvah, it's only Shvur Shechal Boy. Now, the Rabbi says it's not from Shabbos of the Tammuz, but when Shabru quotes the Chai Adam, then we're only restricted to give haircuts to Ketanim under 13, only till Shvur Shechal Boy. Shaila is there's Shvur Shechal Boy this year. Person wants to take a haircut. He's 11 years old. He's 12 years old. He wants to go to the barber. It's a mutter. So if it's Shvur Shechal Boy, he has to refrain. He can't. But if it's not Shvur Shechal Boy, then he'll be allowed to do it. What about cutting nails? Is the person allowed to cut his nails during the 9 days? So over there in Tavkov Nanal Sif Katan Chav, the Shabur writes, there's a machlokes between the Taz and the Magen Avram if one is permitted to cut his nails. But it says the Mishnah Berurah that the whole machlokes, the Taz and the Magen Avram, that's only Shvur Shechal Boy. But if it's before Shvur Shechal Boy, then everyone agrees that it's mutter. But Shvur Shechal Boy, the Magen Avram says it's mutter, the Taz says it's also. Mishnah Berurah himself, he leans to the Taz, and he holds that Shvur Shechal Boy, one should not cut his nails. There are Shulchan with the Magen Avram. But the Mishnah Berurah is machmir like the Taz. But it says the Mishnah Berurah that even the Taz is only Shvur Shechal Boy. Not community this week. If it's Shvur Shechal Boy, one wants to follow the Taz, so he shouldn't cut his nails. But if there's no Shvur Shechal Boy, then be no issue. The last case to end off with, this is very common. sure many of us experience such a scenario. You know, I often get a shayla. I ran out of clothes. Can I make a wash? Person runs out of clothing. He wants to make a wash during the 9 days. Not everybody prepares themselves before the 9 days that they set up. They should have enough clothing for the Tisha B'Av. So a person runs out of garments. He has no shirt to wear. He has no pair of pants to wear, and he wants to know, can he go ahead and clean his shirt? Writes the Shulchan Aruch, Tav Kuf Nun Aleph Sif Gimel. He says it depends. Up until Shvuah Shechal Boy, if it's Ein Leil L'Chol Yachar, he only has one garment. Up until Shvuah Shechal Boy, it's permitted him to wash it. But if it's the actual week in which Tisha B'Av falls out, look at the Machabi. He says, Afilu Ein Leil L'Chol Yachar, even if one has only one garment left. Kibbutz, we're so stringent when it comes to kibbutz because the truth is, if you look at the Mishnah in Tainus, the Mishnah in Tainus lists two things which were forbidden Medina the Mishnah, and that was laundering and haircuts. And the Mishnah writes that the issur of laundering and haircuts only begins Shvuah Shechal. Even meat, the Mishnah says, only applies to the Sudas HaMafsekes. When a person erev Tisha B'Av eats a Sudas HaMafsekes, Medina the Mishnah is only also about the Sudas HaMafsekes. But the week of Tisha B'Av, Medina the Mishnah was mutter. But from this Mishnah is where we made all the minhagim, from the Rishonim, all the customs, all the stringencies, in order that by the time Tisha B'Av sets in, we should be in the proper mood. It's hard to take a person, he's living his life, the hustle bustle of life, right away overnight, to turn him into the setting and into the proper mood of the morning of Tisha B'Av. So like this, it works in progression. We start earlier, different chumras, different stringencies, to put us in that mood, in that setting for Avelis. So Medina the Mishnah is only forbidden to wash and to take haircuts the week of Tisha B'Av. Therefore says the Mechaber, when it comes to washing garments, the week of Tisha B'Av, even if a person doesn't have anything left, he's not allowed to wash the garment. So that's enough community. We have to figure out this year. Person runs out of clothing, he needs a shirt, is he allowed to wash it? If it's Shvuah Shechal, it's a problem. If there's no Shvuah Shechal, it'll be mutter. So what's the din? Tav Kuf Nun Aleph Sif Dalet. Mechaber brings down the first shita, the Lashon Stam. You know, sometimes the Shulchan Aruch writes Yesh Oimim, Yesh Noidim. Here he doesn't even limit it to a yesh. He says it like in a sense unanimously. Stam, without limiting it to a yesh. His first opinion is, and a year like this year, Shabbos Shechol by Tisha B'Av Nitcha, the Achar Shabbos, writes to Mechaber, it's mutter because there's no Shvuah Shechal. But then he concludes and says, but v'yesh, there's another opinion, v'yesh misha oiser, chutz miyom hei u'miyom vav, the mutar l'kavod Shabbos. He brings another opinion. The other opinion says, that no, this year there is a Shvuah Shechal. We have two opinions in the Shulchan Aruch. Which one do we pass on? So the Ben Ish Chai, the Kaf HaChaim, right? We know that one of the klolim in Shulchan Aruch is when you have machlokes is stam, the yesh, halachas kestam. You always follow the shita that wasn't limited. There was no cap of the yesh. It's more stam, and therefore for the Sfardim, the Ish Chai says that this year there's no Shvuah Shechal. However, it's so interesting that the Magen Avram was an Ashkenazic posek who wrote his commentary on the side of Shulchan Aruch. The Magen Avram writes no. The Magen Avram says no. We go like the second day of that the Yesh Misha Oiser, that there is Shvuah Shechal. Who comes to Piskei Teshuvos and listen to this? Comes to Piskei Teshuvos and says that even according to the Magen Avram, that was stringent and held that this year the Shvuah Shechal, that's only things which are also Medina the Mishnah. But other things which are only us mitam minig, or something that's a machlokes in the poskim, that we can be lenient like the first opinion. So now let's go back to the four cases. Other b'nei Ashkenaz are going to go to the Magen Avram. That if it's something that's medina the Mishnah, there will be Shvuah Shechal. Something that's only a minig or a machlokes are going to be mekel. We mentioned earlier that the only two things that were listed in the Mishnah that was chal medina the Mishnah Shvuah Shechal was laundry and haircuts. So let's go back to the Siyum case. Very popular shayla. A person makes a bris tomorrow morning. He wants to invite all his friends to come and partake in the meat. So he said it depends. He might have to set up two tables. He might have to set up a table of 10 people with the closest relatives to have meat, and the other ones can have milchiks, lox, and fish. Does he have to do that? Basar is only a minute. So since Basar is only a minute, because Medina the Mishnah, it's only Asr by Sutam Avsekes. And Erev Tisha B'Av, so Memel, according to Ramah, as long as the person would have came during the year, there's the same halacha as the beginning of the 9 days. Because Bas is only a minute. Since it's only a minute, I could go with the opinion that there is no Shvuah Shechal. What about the second case that we had? The case of giving Kitanim haircuts. When I see a 12-year-old kid, he needs a haircut. Am I allowed to give him a haircut and say, listen, the Chayodim held up until Shvuah Shechal, you can take a haircut. Maybe this year there's no Shvuah Shechal. So here it would be different because this chayres haircuts were one of the things that were listed in the Mishnah. So other b'nai Ashkenaz, we'd be machmer this week not to give a 12-year-old child a haircut. The Sfardim, they go like the Stam, they would be allowed. Kibbutz and thing in the Mishnah. So regarding kibbutz for machmer, then this shul shechalvei. However, when it comes to cutting nails, over here is a machlokes of Taz and Magen Avram. So being that cutting nails was a machlokes of Taz and Magen Avram, as long as we have two bona fide shittas that are disagreeing, we're allowed to go with the opinion that holds there's no shul shechalvei, and therefore this year, according to all shittas, it'd be mutter to go ahead and for a person to cut his nails up until Shabbos. So you say very nice, fits him beautifully like a glove. But what are these two opinions arguing? Why does one opinion say that there is no shul shechalvei? What's the lumnus? How do we understand this machlokes? And the V'yesh Mishaisa says, no, there is shul shechalvei this year. What are you arguing with? What's the lumnus to the machlokes? So the Ksav Sofer writes, a beautiful shot. The Ksav Sofer writes that we can analyze and understand the fact that Chazal established the timeless the fast day on Sunday two different ways. One way to understand this is that, the truth is, parenthetically, just Agav, Rebbe tells us, Gershon Shita was, he says that if I would have been part of Congress when they voted, when to establish Tisha B'Av, I would have told them to do it on the 10th of every single year, not just this year. You know why? Because we know that even though they ignited the flames, the fire began on the 9th towards the evening, the actual Heichel, the actual Beis HaMikdash burnt on the 10th. So it says the Gershon, if the Beis HaMikdash itself, the sanctuary, the Heichel, the Ulam, the Kodesh Kedoshim all burnt on the 10th, why are we fasting on the 9th? We should have fasted on the 10th. The Gemara says, Gershon has a great time. How do we refute this time? Why are we fasting on Tisha B'Av? So it says the Gemara, I'll tell you why. You should maschalta. Maschalta the producer, go bust in the beginning. Okay, so that's good in a regular year when you're able to fast on the 9th. But in a year like now, that Chazal foresaw, and the Nevi'im saw, that they're going to come on the calendar, that there are going to be times that Tisha B'Av is going to fall on Shabbos, so maybe over there they initially went ahead and established the kindness on Sunday. That's one side. That they originally enacted the kindness on Sunday, that this year the kindness is Yud B'Av. What do you say no? Really, they made one takana. Every single year Tisha B'Av falls out on the 9th and we don't change that. And Sunday is a tashlumin. It's like a payment. It's a tashlumin that Chacham, the Nevi'im said, listen, since he can't practice the activities of mourning, he can't fast. On Shabbos, he can't avail himself on Shabbos, he can't sit on the floor. He can't tell you not to wear leather shoes, that's available for Hesi. You can't do that. So maybe they said, as a tashlumin, practice the activities on Sunday. Really, Tisha B'Av is Shabbos, but I can't do the activities of mourning on Shabbos. So maybe they said, do a tashlumin the next day on Sunday. Two different ways how to understand this. He sent to Masham Shiloh. I just got the Shiloh today, this afternoon. You have a boy, he's turning 13 on Sunday. So Shabbos, he's still a cotton. And Sunday, he's becoming a gadol. He's even afraid to fast Tisha B'Av. So the Chayr should be telling this two stuff with Ksav Sofer. If you learn that they originally acted the kindness on Sunday and it's not working as a tashlumin, so when Sunday comes, he's a gadol, he should have to fast. But if you learn that really the kindness is on Shabbos, but since we can't practice the activities of mourning on Shabbos, and Mela they told us to be noited on Sunday, so Mela we know the cloud that a tashlumin can't be greater than the chiyuv itself. So on Shabbos itself he was patur, and Sunday's a tashlumin for Shabbos, so of course he should be patur. With these two tzadim, we can understand so beautifully the machlokes that the Machaber brings down if they're shul shechalvei or not. Why? Because if you learn that they created the kindness on Sunday, so then we understand that there's no shul shechalvei this week because they moved Tisha B'Av to Sunday. So maybe that's why this whole week there's no shul shechalvei. But if you learn that really Tisha B'Av is Shabbos, it's just that since we can't do that on Hagos, the halachas of it we try to do it on Sunday. So maybe since Shabbos is the Mitzvah's Tisha B'Av, so it makes a lot of sense why the whole entire week should be shul shechalvei. So these 2 days would be totally mamish in this chakir with Ksav Sofer. If he said, listen to this. We could say the Machava and the Ramah is mamish long l'shikase. Why is that? When it comes this Friday night, is the halachas of Avelis B'tzina noig or not noig? You're right, publicly we don't. We don't do Avelis. What about Avelis B'tzina? If someone Loyalechem is an Aval on Shabbos, even though he doesn't sit Shiva, but it counts as one of the days of Shiva, because the halachas B'tzina are noig. It's also the Kasher Shamita, your halachas that are noig Avelis B'tzina. So what happens this Friday night? Is Avelis B'tzina noig or not? The Mechaber writes, Tav Kuf Nun Daled, Sif Yud Ches. Writes the Mechaber, this Shabbos, we turn the Kulan, Afilu b'kashim shamito, there's no availus whatsoever. Comes the Ramah Hagah, the Yesh Misharis. What's the machlokes? It's beautiful. The Mechaber that held that there's no Shua Shechalboy is because he learned that in the year that the Nevi'im saw that Shabbos, Tisha B'Av was going to fall on Shabbos. They're establishing Tisha B'Av on Sunday that year, and it's not a Tashlumin. So now it's very Gishmak, or Shabbos, Drom Shabbat Sinah Mutter, because it's not Tisha B'Av. Hashenkin, the Ramah perhaps Efshe held, like the other side, that it's a Tashlumin. Really Tisha B'Av is Shabbos. Being a Tisha B'Av is Shabbos, therefore he held Drom Shabbat Sinah online. So now it's very Gishmak, and the Mechaber L'Shitasi. It fits in beautifully. But I just want to end off the argument. I want to say a short word, but before that, I want to end off the argument with a kasha. I'm not going to have time to say the teretz, but let me just end you off with a tremendous kasha on this Mechaber. If we're right that the Mechaber holds that they enacted the kindness originally on Sunday, so how is this halacha going to fit? What's the din if a person goes ahead this year and he makes a bris Sunday morning? It's a nitcha. It's not a regular year. Regular Tisha B'Av, a person makes a bris. There's no shaila. You can't eat. You can't take a shower. The mitzvah is simchas yontif of a yachid is not doicha avelus derabi. But it says the Shulchan Aruch, what about a year where it's a nitcha and a person is making a bris for a child, and not only the parents, you have the moil and the samdik. They're all considered the valley bris. Are they allowed to go ahead and break their fast? Haskins the mechaber tovkov nun test and sif test the li cholkim. Nobody argues with it. When a person makes a bris, he's allowed to eat meat, he's allowed to eat, he's allowed to drink, he's allowed to drink, he's allowed to shower. He can have himself, him, the Merlin, the Sadik, they could go ahead, they could eat lox, they could eat fish, they're allowed to break their fast, they're not going to fast. They're allowed to even eat roshets, the Mechaber says. So l'chayru, I don't understand. If you learn that it's a tashlumin like the Ramah, so then we could say it's a kind of shenitcha. And the kind of shenitcha is more kuladik than a regular year. But according to the Mechaber that held, that it's not considered kind of shenitcha, so how could the same Shulchan Aruch, how could the same Mechaber say, asking that when it comes to a Baal Bris, we allow him to break his fast and be roichetz kedarkis. So we'll end over this kasha and this Torah on it, but maybe we'll get to it a different time. I just want to end off with one thought. I remember last year on Tisha B'Av, I read over a story about a family in Beit Shemesh. And this young girl, 16 years old, is writing Nebuch that when she was just the year before, her mother passed away. She left over a whole family of Yisraelim. And she said, just as difficult, you can imagine the sorrow, the pain, the suffering, the anguish, being a Yisraelim. But she says, parallel, just the same pain is when she sees her younger sister that's 3 years old, her other sister that's 5 years old, and she sees them growing up without a mother. To her, that's the same exact pain of losing her mother. And she said, you know why? This is what she writes. She says, you know why? Because at least I had the merit, I was able to taste what it means to be raised by a mother, to be hugged, to be loved by a parent. But my siblings, they'll never know what it means to be embraced by a mother who cares for them, who loves them, who shows them warmth. They'll never taste that. And after reading this story, I said to myself, isn't that the story of our lives when it comes to Tisha B'Av? After all, it comes to Tisha B'Av, we're mourning the Beis Hamikdash, but we never tasted it. We have no musig, we have no understanding of what it meant. Life during this month of the Beis Hamikdash, what it stood for. We saw Kayhanam Avigdosam, Leviim B'Shiram. You know, many times people go to Eretz Yisrael, and they're elevated, they become inspired. Imagine a person was Zeicha, and Reb Chaim was alive. People told me firsthand, they went to Reb Chaim, they felt they were mamish standing by the Shechina. They felt so elevated. They felt so transformed. They were transcendent. They were on a whole different level. The kedusha that they were feeling, they would never think of doing a ched at that time. And even when they came back, they would come back at such a high, so inspired. He stood in front of Reb Chaim. Can you imagine a person who stood in the Beis Hamikdash where the Shechina was? What it meant to come to the Oil Regel, he saw the Hanam of Ekdosim, he saw the Avoidis, he saw what Yerushalayim was, and the Hoydim, the Kedusha of Baal Yisrael. We have no musik to this. We're so far from it. So how do we feel Tisha B'Av? Tashim Pei Beis, what's our shaykhs? How do we feel Tisha B'Av? Yirmiyahu Novi tells us B'choi Sifkei Alaylo. Zok the Gemara in Sanhedrin Ma'aseh Bisha Achas. He was a woman in the community that when all the townspeople went to sleep, she would begin to wail and she would cry, she would lament. You heard the sobbing because never she buried a child. The pain that she had, she couldn't sleep at night. Says the Gemara, Reb Gamliel heard this woman crying, and that prompted him that he started crying. But says the Gemara, you know what Reb Gamliel cried about? He cried about Churban Beis Hamikdash. What does this Gemara mean? How does this make sense? This woman's crying because she lost a child. That prompts the Gamliel to cry about the Beis Hamikdash. The teretz is over 50. You know why? Because here lies the message for us Eden and Golos. That the Gemara is teaching us that all sorrows, all hardships, all sufferings, all pain is rooted in the very fact that we no longer have the Beis Hamikdash. Because if you would have a Beis Hamikdash, there wouldn't be any more sorrows. People wouldn't have a difficult time with Shidduchim, with Parnasa. The ailments, we wouldn't hear about Cholim. That's the message of the Gemara B'choi Sifka Alayla. I want to share with you a frightening Yavitz. I saw these words of the Yavitz. It sent a shiver to my spine. The great Yavitz of Yaakov Emden writes, if not for the fact that we'd only have this iniquity in our hands. Shemesabim Karoya Yushalayim. Die. Laharach Kol Yisenu. He says the ched itself, the grievous ched of not mourning for the destruction and the loss, and to yearn, to anticipate for Yushalayim. Is he be'enai hasiba kroiva yoyse geluya atzuma b'chazok l'chol hashmodos hamuflogos hararois Hashem ratzonu b'cholos b'chol mekomis pizarenu. Says the Yavitz, you know why? All the tzaros he writes, the pogroms, the hashmodos, everything. Says the Yavitz is in the fact that we're really not yearning the Beis Hamikdash enough. It's not enough part of our lives. You're Simcha Wasson when he's 10 years old. He started Hilgo Chavetz Chaim. He's 10 years old. He said, he remembers as a child. He was there to the kick of the rabbi. Chavetz Chaim was old. He was weak. He was frail. But he got up before Nehila. With the small amount of strength he had left, he called out to the tzibur, to the congregation, to the kehillah. He told them, he says, how could we live so comfortably? How could we live so complacent? Don't we realize in Akisei Shalom that the Ribbon Shalom is Bitzar, the Shechin is Bitzar? You know, it's unbelievable in Chazal how we see how much the Ribbon Shalom values and is much of us. The Medrash tells us, what's the dialogue of the Ummah Sa'ilum? Chol Sichos Shal Bris. What are the nations of the world? What's their chatter? What's their conversations? Like the Medrash, Ara Savid, Ara Loy Savid. Is this a good piece of property? It's a good real estate, good place to invest. Does it make money? Does it not make money? It's Binyani Artsis. That's what consumes them. That's what takes them over. Their mind is focused on Ara Savid, Ara Loy Savid. Abel writes the Medrash, Be Yisrael b'choleis mispalim al binyan beis hamikdash. But us Klal Yisrael, yes, we have to make parnasa, we have to support our families, give tzedakah, pay our tuitions. But what's really on our mind? What do we care about? What do we yearn for? What bothers us? So the Medrash, it's al binyan beis hamikdash, that we turn to the Rebbeinu Shalom, we say, Eni yecholim oid, masa yibana beis hamikdash. So you say, what could we do? The generations before didn't bring the Gula, we're going to bring the Gula. Says the Chavetz Chaim, listen to what the Chavetz Chaim writes. The Chavetz Chaim writes, Ki anachnu kreidnu Gula. We're so close, and this is before it's Feit Avel's Machama. The Daibe Ma'atzchus Bishvil Yigo, like the Chavetz Chaim, that the Beilim of the previous generations, the Tzadikim, they accomplished so much. It's only a little bit left. It says the Chavetz Chaim is Daibe Ma'atzchi Yisein, it's enough, but I was more schusten to be able to bring the Gula. And he says, even without that, look at all the tzaros, the suffering, the pain, the tzaros in Klal Yisrael. That alone is enough to be Mechakel. So what's the eitzah? What's the eitzah? Shtei the Gemara Makas Chavdalot. Amarav Mistafina Mahaikra. Rav said, I stood in trepidation. I was in tremendous fear. Mistafina Mahaikra. I was petrified when I read this pasuk. Va'avadutem bagoyim. The pasuk says, "Va'avaditem agoyim," is going to come a time that we're going to perish, we're going to be lost. We'll be lost amongst the nations. There's no hope. Says Rav Mustafinim Ha'ikra, I was petrified. Rabbi, you look around today with the assimilation rate today. Yidden Nebuch that are mixed in there, the children are already going with 81%. I know a Yid in Minneapolis, unbelievable person. Came about Tshuva, tremendous Talmid Chacham, Baki B'Shas, one of the biggest neurologists in the country. He told me, what 80%? He says, I'm the only from Yid in my entire family. Zamarav, Mustafinim Ha'ikra, I was terrified of this pasuk. About them going to be lost. Master Papa says not so fast. I have the AIDS. Yes, we'll be lost. But it will be lost like the lost object that the owner, the master, looks for and searches for. Yeah, we're lost. We're like the sheep that's lost. Why the set? Why not the inanimate object? The lifeless object? Why the set? Why are we like the lost sheep? The parent says, you know why? Because when a sheep gets lost, it calls for its master. And what Rav Papa is telling us in this Gemara is that if we call out to the Ribono Shel Olam, we're like that said, that we don't turn away, but we call out to our Father. That's our remedy. That's the antidote. The words of the Yavis. The 3 weeks, this is the Zman of Bein HaMetzorim. As busy as we are, all the mitzvahs that we're doing, what we're accomplishing. You know, the Panovich Rav writes, he wrote this over 40 years ago. The Panovich Rav, and he saw Slobodka. He saw all the yeshivas, Navardiks. He saw all the yeshivas. The Baruch Goldstein says that the learning that we have today, it's never been like this in Tzorban Abayis. The mass scale of people learning, the Dafyonishis, the Chavrusas, people being always Kavit, Balbatanim, Kavit, and Matayra. The tzedakah that we have today, the Baruch Goldstein says we never had learning like this. And using the greatest yeshivas in Europe. It's up to Yavitz, it could be Torah, it could be Chesed. But you know what's lacking? Are we hearing the base of Mikdash? We realize the loss of what it meant to live a life with such Shechina, with such Tahara, with such Kedusha. You realize what the level of what a Yid was. Shamshin Pinkis, Tzadik HaGoyim, Zechatzadik HaKadosh HaBrachi describes, you take the little child that was in elementary school. Kids are 10 years old, it's already 12:30 at night. The mother comes to the room, she sees the kid still up, and she says, Sheflo, why don't you go to sleep? He says, no, just give me 5 more minutes. She sees he has something under the covers that he's hiding. It's not Netflix. It's not watching YouTube. You know what's there? It's a Mishnayis Tahiris. The mother comes in 15 minutes later. She says, Yankla, you have to get up tomorrow and go to yeshiva. He says, yeah, just give me another 10 minutes. The love that you would have for Torah, because all Yidden were like that. The Kedusha was there. So the Yavitz and Moli, like how you be a Daniel is there, is Dai Laharach Bigol was saying that this is this man we get focused, and we can't lose focus of what the avoid of these Yomim are. Let me end off with a verse from Reb Shavsky Delovich, the legendary one of the greatest Magidim. Listen to this verse of Shavsky Delovich on the Pasuk in Yeshaya, Koyam Ar Hashem Melech Yisrael V'Goy Aloy. The Eibishter writes, I'm the Melech, it's my Welt, V'Goy Aloy, going to be redeemed. V'Lo Yazren, V'Lo Yazren. You're not going to be forsaken. You're going to be taken out of his goals. But it's up to Ribono Shel Olam, Ani Rishon, V'Ani Achron, V'Alod HaYizem Elokim. So Shavsky Delovich, Koyam Ar Hashem Melech Yisrael V'Goy Aloy, Lo Yazren. So, if Shavsky Delovich, when a person wants to acquire the Talmud, a person wants to buy a Behema. With words alone, he's not going to become its owner. There has to be a kinyan. Something has to take place. Something has to transpire in order for me to become the Bailam. And how is one kind of a Behema? That's what Mashiach. Rabbi said there are 2 ways to do Mashiach, Gemara says in Kedusha. One is Hekisha B'Makol. Person hits it with his staff. And by hitting the behemoth with his staff, it causes the behemoth to move. Since the behemoth moved because of me, he got into the Mashiach. It says the word is another way. You call the animal the Hibah, and the animal walks. So since the animal walked because of me, they have a Kinyan Mashiach. Two nafkaminas between these two and Mashiach. Two differences. The Tisha B'Av, when he hits the animal with the stick, it hurts. The animal's in pain. When he calls it, there's no pain. The Tisha B'Av, when he hits it with his staff, he's achron, he stands behind the animal. When he's karlo, when he calls it, Zani Rishon, he stands in front of the animal. Zakab Shapsi Belovich. Kaimar Hashem Melech Yisrael B'Koyeloi. Loyaz Venu can be redeemed. It's a HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The choice is up to us. It can be Ani Rishon. Karlo V'Yibo. Yibon Shalom Christ us. The greatest demonstration of Ahava. It says Yibon Shalom Chalilu can be Ani Achron. To be behind you. Which is a Kish B'Mako. Wherever Rabbi said we felt the Mako. It's too much of the Mako. Let's make the resolve. Conviction. Ani Rishon. Turn to the Baruch and tell him, yes, from that group, that we could say proudly like the Yavitz, Semach Dovid Abduchal Eretz Tzniach. The words of the Medrash of the Yeshtikful Achri Sechel. It's in the Ador Shemitzatum Ugul Sechel. It's in the Ador that's going to anticipate and yearn and long for the coming of Mashiach. It says the Medrash is Miyad Ligu. We have to be Zeichel to be that door with the coming of Mashiach. It came Meir Yemenu. Amen.